Well, it's really a bum deal, but I'm down here in San Diego and there's no hot tub. But, I mean, all there is like sunshine every day, the waves rolling in on the beach, that kind of stuff. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about today. I had a thought experiment and I imagined myself addicted to opioids or heroin like that. And what I saw was that I would be deeply ashamed in front of my wife, my children, and my grandchildren. And then there'd be pain from that. And so the most likely thing I would do would be to take another hit. Gave me a lot of empathy for people with addictions. So, what do you think of the possibility that addiction is the avoiding of pain, the blunting of pain, instead of confronting and addressing the pain? So, if you'll entertain that possibility, every single one of us is an addict. Many people blunt their pain with activity instead of drugs. Let's say a man who did not receive love from his mother will seek to blunt that pain with sex. A woman who suffers the low regard of men will possibly blunt that pain with sex. I'm trying to make this dang. Anyway. A lot of us blunt anxiety with food, or we blunt the pain of meaninglessness or the pain of no love with excessive busyness. I bet you know somebody like that. So let's consider the parable of we'll see. This poor farmer loses his mare when it escaped the paddock. So the neighbor comes over to commiserate. Oh, that's just such a tragedy. And the old farmer says, well, we'll see. The next day, the mare returns on her own, leading a stallion. The neighbor comes over and says, what good luck! Isn't that great? And the old farmer says, well, we'll see. So the next day, the farmer's son is out trying to tame the stallion and breaks his leg. The neighbor comes over, oh, what a tragedy. And the old guy says, well, let's see. And the next day, the warlord comes roaring through the region, grabbing up all the young men to make them go off and fight for him. What a blessing. Well, we'll see. So the lesson that you could take from the parable is that pain is an illusion. So whatever appears to be a loss or a gain, we just need to wait and see. But the problem with that is there really is pain. Like rocks are hard and water is wet, there is pain. But like it says on the bumper sticker, pain is real, but suffering is optional. It's been argued for millennia by philosophers that suffering is an illusion and something we choose. So if we look at the parable to tell us something about suffering, then yes, when we are suffering, then we usually need to wait and see. So for example, how many times have you lost a job or you saw a friend lose a job and the next job was a heck of a lot better? It was not a tragedy that the job was lost. So if you're with me on this thing of addiction being a false response to suffering, and you're with me on that suffering is optional, then we now create a very disturbing human dilemma. When we turn away from suffering, doggone it, where am I? I got it, notes here. I'm doing this from notes. Then we find something to blunt or distract the suffering. Does it not follow then that we are choosing to preserve the optional suffering? Because here's the pain and we're suffering from it, but instead of addressing the suffering or make it the pain, whatever, instead of addressing that, we go over into activity or food, which then causes the suffering to be preserved. So I'm just going to guess, but for example, loneliness is a suffering. You can lose somebody and there's pain, but the loneliness that follows it and grief for a significant amount of time, that's suffering, and it's chosen. So let's just say that loneliness provides the constant fuel to feed our fires of resentment that someone should have loved us and did not. So to give up loneliness, we'd have to give up the resentment or the self-pity. And that can be very hard to do. So possibly every addiction in all of us, every addiction would require that we self-discover how the preserving of our suffering by overeating or overactivity, how that feeds something in us that we want to keep, such as resentment or hatred or self-pity. Instead of asking, why don't more people give up their addictions? The real question may be, how is it that so many people are able to? Tomorrow's question is, what would an addiction-free life look like? Do you know anyone who has such a life? Let me know. So keep in mind that living so as to never feel pain is not the same as living free of suffering. Living free of suffering would mean living an active, loving life with its slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, without seeking busyness to preserve suffering. That's tomorrow.